Welcome to another exciting episode of Women in the Making. Priyanka Chopra Jonas said, "Success is not measured by the positions you hold, but by the impact you make in the lives of others." In a rapidly evolving digital landscape, there are a few women like our guest today who are a blazing trail of innovation. Join us on this power-packed episode as we dive deep into an inspiring journey of being an immigrant, revolutionizing the tech industry, and leading many women to discover their true potential. Get inspired and witness the power of limitless determination. Help me welcome Abigail Franco. Abby, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share with you.
Absolutely. I always love to start the first segment knowing a little more about your childhood. You come from a different country. Can you talk us and walk us through exactly where you come from and how did you land up in America?
Sure. I come from El Salvador, which is a small country in Central America. And I have some great memories and tough memories when I was a kid. Some of my most happy memories are playing out in the woods, climbing trees, and pretending that flowers were like food. So those were some of the good parts. The other parts were a little bit more challenging. So it was in the middle of nowhere. We had no electricity, so no power. No water, no running water. So
Wow.
we had to get up very early to go fetch water so that we could, take a shower and wash our clothes and do all those things. And then had to walk very far to go to school. And so it was
you had
challenging.
to walk to school.
Yeah. But I'm the youngest of 7. So I come
Wow.
from a pretty big family.
That's a big family.
It's a big family. And, being the youngest also meant that I had obviously not the hardest things to do because all of my siblings were older. So they were the ones doing the tough work. And my parents also, obviously, were there for us. I'm very thankful that I grew up with both parents and all my siblings. And they were all there for me during that challenging time. But I had a really interesting childhood in that sense, that it was very rough, but I had a lot of love from my family.
Definitely. How did your parents manage building such a big family and, also giving you the courage to be yourself, be fearless, and pursue your own dreams? How did you manage that?
How they manage, I have no idea. I always say this, there was no TV, there was no electricity, so they had to keep themselves busy. And it was back in those days when, they had kids, and I don't know how they managed, to be honest. I think that my parents, well, since I was born, I remember they were very... they were rooted in Christianity, and so they would go to church every single day. And so they had these values that they raised us with, where, respect and all of those things that, made us, who made me, was because they were very strict. I could not do most things that people think of. Like, I couldn't wear pants. I couldn't wear makeup. I couldn't,
Wow.
There was no even way of like talking back to your parents. I mean, one look and like you knew. And so I grew up, with a very strict, with a lot of discipline. A lot of beatings and things like that, but that was just the way things were. And, it took me a long time to appreciate, because I always thought like, oh my gosh, we have to go to church every single day. And, I wanted to do all of those things that other kids couldn't do. But now I appreciate that really built me to be the person that I am today.
Yeah, I don't think my kids are ever going to understand what you're talking about, because I came from a time where we had TV, but we had one TV in the entire house where we used to share and watch. Everybody used to watch one show together a day. And my kids are, I guess, or the kids of this world are all about obsession about iPads and TV. So we live in a completely different world.
We do.
And your story is very different and inspirational, because coming from absolutely no TV to coming to a country where things are so different.
Yeah.
So as an immigrant, tell us, what were the challenges when you moved here and how did you come here?
I moved here when I was 10 years old, and the reason why I moved to the U.S. is because El Salvador was going through a civil war. And like I said, we lived out in the middle of nowhere. And so we were always in the line of fire. Like literally, I remember the shootings and just being scared for our lives. And my parents decided that the only chance to give me a chance to get an education and frankly survive was to let me come to the US with one of my older sisters. And I had by then siblings that had moved to the US. Had come here as immigrants themselves, and they thought that it would be a good opportunity for me to come learn the language, for maybe a few months or no more than 2 years. That was the plan. And then go back. At the age of 10, I had no idea what that meant.
Go back to El Salvador.
Yeah, go back. So the plan was always for me to just, everybody was hoping for the war to be over and that things would be stabilized. And so I don't know how my parents found the strength to frankly let me go without knowing what it meant, because
absolutely,
one of the things I didn't mention was that my parents did not have an education. They must have had like a second grade education. They learned to read because they learned to read the Bible, but they never had a chance to really go to college or anything like that. And so they really trusted my older sister with my life, and she was the one that was already here, and they really felt that if she thought it was a good idea for me to come to the US, that she was probably right. And so they took a chance, and so my sister helped me to come to the US. My sister had been in the US for like 5 years, so I really had not spent time with her. I didn't know her. To me, she was also a stranger. And so it was really tough coming to the US with not knowing the language.
Sure, absolutely.
Being away from my parents. I really thought I was going on a trip, and I thought I'll be home in a few hours, And
especially when you were just 10 years old.
Yes, and I remember being at the airport. Actually, I remember when they told me the day before, like I literally saw the passport, and then I started thinking like, oh, okay, so I'm really like, this is happening. And I remember at the airport, just that last sight of my mom, and not being able to go to her, and then not being able to, like, I didn't feel like I had a choice at that point. So that was the, start of a whole new life, landing here. And frankly, like I cried every night for years. So it was really tough, but it made me very strong and resilient.
Of course, I'm sure you have become one. Let's move on to your college days. Tell us, how did being the only women, let alone women of color, in your undergraduate studies affect your thought process, and how did you feel at that moment?
Frankly, as hard as it was, because I felt like an outsider, and I always felt like I couldn't relate to a lot of the things that I was studying. Even I remember like a lot of the problems in physics that we had to solve, and it was about like valves and pistons, and I had never played with cars. I didn't know what that meant, and all of those things make it harder for us as women, right? Because you really, you can't picture these things, right?
Yes.
And so, but one of the things that I did was I learned to build partnerships with the guys in the class, in terms of like, I was better at some things that they weren't. And so I kind of learned to barter with them. And I think it helped me because in the real world, I find myself being the only woman in a lot of meetings and a lot of teams.
Sure.
And so I think it sort of prepared me for being different and having a unique perspective. It was harder, right? Because I feel like you always have to prove yourself every single time. You have to know things, have a lot more details than they do. And it's no different when you go from college to corporate, or it makes it harder. It's harder, but I think it sort of started to prepare me for that experience.
Right, absolutely. I also feel like being an immigrant, I'm also an immigrant.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have the choice and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
And sometimes you want to be there. But it is such a powerful thing to be in a country and also allow yourself to be seen.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
You kept on climbing corporate ladders, and I read an article about you where you mentioned somebody said you don't look like an executive, or being part of a meeting where it's a male dominated meeting room. How do you handle situations like that?
I have to say that that specific instance where somebody say like, oh, you don't look the person I was expecting to see. At the moment, it was hurtful because I'm like, well, what were you expecting? This is who I am.
Do I need a
Do I need?
mustache? Was there any specific experience that you'd like to share where you had to really stand for your ground and assert your worth, especially being an immigrant?
There's been several situations. I think one of the situations that I would say where I learned to make sure that I was valuing myself and not going by what I usually do, which is just be thankful for everything. The last time that I was getting a promotion, and I don't like the word promotion because I feel like nobody offered me the job. I had to do 10 interviews to actually get the role. But I remember when I was talking to HR and they were so excited to tell me that I had gotten the role after going through again 10 interviews, and it wasn't given to me. I had to compete for it with internal and external candidates, and they said, so here's the offer, just sign it. And I said, well, do I get a chance to counter? And they were like, they weren't even expecting me to ask that. They were like, "Why, are you kidding me? Like, you're already here." Because
they
it was within
do that if another man did that.
It was within the same company, so their assumption was, well, you're getting a higher title and you're getting a pay raise. Why should we even bother, right?
Yeah.
Like, you should be thankful that you got the role and not even ask. And it was just, it really felt to me that way. And I really had to go and talk to a few mentors to get advice from them because frankly, I didn't know how to do it myself. And because in reality, I did feel like, oh, thank God I got the role, right? But I also knew that if they were hiring a candidate from outside, they probably would have gotten a lot more than I did. And so I talked to a few people and I got different perspectives, and I really had to prepare and rehearse to have this conversation about why I felt that I needed to get a little bit of a higher amount than what they were offering me. And I thought, they're just going to say no, retract the offer and give it to somebody else. And so, just having that fear, which wasn't too long ago.
Yes, I absolutely agree. It's an unspoken entity. And I've spoken with a lot of women who exactly have the same words as you, and I've myself experienced when I was offered a job, they thought they gave me the best package, and it was my husband who actually told me that, are you going to accept that? And I said, why not? Because I assumed that this was the best package. He said, you need to fight back and ask for more. But because I have a supporting partner who can guide me through this, I knew that this was not right. Because as women, we just accept. And that acceptance should not be there. We need to know our worth and always fight back for what we deserve than thinking this is our worth. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
As you're climbing the corporate ladder, there's an importance of continuous learning, education, and of course attending seminars or trainings. I know you've done many of them, and there were some that really helped you with self-realization and reassert your career. So can you walk us through how and when you have thought of advocating these things for yourself?
Sure. One of my goals is actually every year I need to do something to make sure that I'm learning something new or something different. And I aim to do at least one certification every year. And that's my personal goal. And that's because I know that we have to keep ourselves relevant, and I have to lead by example. And I love to learn also. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, try to read a lot of books, but I try to be intentional about doing something that's an actual certification or learning every year. And one of the trainings that I was lucky to have, which anybody can actually do this
Sure.
training, is the Unremarkable training by Google. And I joined a session, and one of the trainings was about, well, it was very simple actually. It was an introduction to it. And they had a group of I think it was more between like 15 and 20 directors and so from different companies, and they said, okay, we're going to start by giving you 3 minutes for you to write down why you're remarkable. Just brainstorm and just create a list of things.
That's lovely, right? To
Yeah,
write
it
about
is.
yourself.
Yeah, and they figure it would be easy, and I'm sitting there and I couldn't come up with anything, and I'm like, oh, okay, the time is gonna be up, and I can't think of anything, and I see all these guys because there was only a few women. It was literally like a 90 to 10% ratio, and I could see like other women were struggling like I was, and I couldn't come up with anything, and the men were like, writing really quickly. And then when they started reading why they were remarkable, I was thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Like, you're just doing your job. I would have never thought that was remarkable if I were thinking about those things for myself. And it really got me thinking that I need to be aware of the things that make me remarkable. And they don't have to be big things, but we all do things that make us unique and that frankly make us remarkable
every single day.
Yeah, every
Yes.
single day. And sometimes you may think that it's just you doing your job, but I also remember thinking about how I needed to change the way that I was talking to myself.
But I think this remarkable training is actually remarkable because we never write anything about our own self in this way. We write positive affirmations. That's the max we hear when you wake up. You talk positive. You write positive affirmations. But we've never thought from the perspective that write about yourself on how remarkable you have been maybe today, or maybe you are as a person. And I think I've learned something today. I've heard about a syndrome which is called corporate Stockholm syndrome, where men or women are probably not treated well by their mentors or by their bosses or by their managers, but they continue to work like that because they think they are in a situation where this is normal. Can you tell me if you've ever experienced something from being a mentor or being in the mentorship program or guiding anybody around that?
Unfortunately, I've had several people that I mentor come to me with experiences where they felt like they were not being treated fairly, or just frankly just being disrespected by their managers or leaders, and they didn't know what to do, or they just felt like they had to deal with it, and I had to work with them or help them, coach them on dealing with that. And it's unfortunate because we all have different, especially here in the US, right? We have people coming from different countries, different cultures. And sometimes people feel like, okay, it may just be a culture thing. And I've also noticed that when you have like a manager and employees that are from the same country, sometimes they feel like they can treat each other differently, because of where they were raised or how they were raised. And I've had some instances like that, and I tell the person, like, you're in the US, like, you deserve to be respected. And there are some things that as a company, we don't allow. Like, you need to be respected, you need to feel valued, you need to feel appreciated, and know that those things are the rules, regardless of where you're from or who you work for. And I've had to help them sometimes have conversations with HR because they didn't know what to do, so they came to me. And sometimes things are pretty serious where people don't feel like they're in a safe space, and people should never feel like they're not safe, and when they're disrespected and not feeling valued, because we're all human, right? And especially in corporate America, most companies have rules and they have values that we have to abide to. And I just encourage people to make sure that they have people around them that they can go to for support if they don't feel comfortable talking to their managers or even calling a hotline. Go to somebody that you can trust, but definitely know that you don't have to feel you shouldn't have to be afraid to go to work every single day. That's just not what you should
That's
put up
absolutely
with.
valuable piece of information, and I don't think anybody should struggle with that even for a day.
Yeah.
You see the abuse of this
Yeah.
kind, and you need to really put your face forward and notify the right people that
Yeah.
required to know.
Yeah.
How important is it for women of color to have networking opportunities or to share their experiences in the technology industry?
It's so important, especially the part about sharing their experiences, because we all have different experiences. And I think that learning from each other just helps us get stronger. And what I have noticed is that sometimes there are things that we don't expect to hear from people that just resonate with us. And it wasn't until a few years ago when I felt comfortable sharing my story of how I came here as an immigrant and how I grew up. And I think that and frankly, because I was ashamed, I was embarrassed for people to know that, because I thought that they would judge me differently and treat me differently, right? Because I don't need everybody on my team knowing how poor I was and how I came here and all of those things, because I thought, well, how will they still respect me? Will they, even my colleagues and things like that? And so, but the way that I see it now is like, okay, this is who I am. This is who shaped me. And, hopefully people will see the resilience, and other people that may be going through that experience will know that it's possible to overcome those challenges and know that their goals aren't impossible, right? And that they can do even better than what I did. And so now I'm like, I'm too old to care about what other people think. Now I really care about helping others, and if sharing my experience will do that, then that's why I'm here talking to you. And so I think that for other women to do the same thing will help others, right, that can relate to them, feel the same way too. And so I think that having that community and opportunities is really key, because we need to see people that look like us and talk like us and have the experiences so that we can find that support. I think that really can shape us also.
Absolutely. And I'm going to combine two questions. Let me know if that makes sense. But when we come as an immigrant, we have language barriers. And a lot of times we also feel like an imposter. So combining these two, have you had any experience either yourself dealing with that, or somebody that you've helped solve this puzzle and, this mystery for them?
I still do. I find myself doubting myself every day. I wouldn't say every day, but I still have an accent, and I feel like when I get nervous, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to
judge you.
They're going to judge me. But then I hear other people and other men that their accent is even worse than me, and I'm like, I don't think they care. And frankly, nobody's even paying attention as long as they can understand you. But I do think that we need to make sure we understand that the imposter syndrome doesn't exist. It's within our mind, right? And it's because we worry about how people judge us and what they think of us, right? And then us thinking, what are we sharing with them?
I think one has to learn to discipline themselves to stay away and act as an imposter, because we are not. We are who we are, but till the time they don't get carried away in that emotions of being an imposter, I think they can, held themselves back and be accountable to their identity, because people lose their identity while thinking they are an imposter.
They do. And I think it's also about not comparing ourselves to others. And I think that imposter syndrome sometimes comes from that, from us looking at other people and feeling like, well, do I have maybe the same education or the same knowledge? But again, just go back and look at yourself and look at about all the things that you've accomplished, and you've had to, all the things that you've had to do to get to where you are. And I think we forget that, right? I remember being in a training where it was for executives, and being in the sessions where we had to share about our how we got to where we were. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, these people, like their parents were like principals at universities and they grew up with, different kinds of backgrounds. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, but then I also thought, well, if I'm here, then I just need to show them that it doesn't really matter where you
Yes.
came from and that you can still be here and have an opportunity like everybody.
Absolutely. Abby, what advice would you give to women who aspire to be in the tech industry and pursue, leadership roles in the male-dominated field?
I would say don't give up, and obviously focusing on the technical skills is important, but I would also say focus on the soft skills. As women, we bring a different perspective to the table, and I see how, especially for in the technical field, right, you're expected to know the whatever technology it is that you're working on, and sometimes people overshoot on the technical skills but disregard what it means to be able to communicate well and to be concise and to have empathy and all of those things that frankly like make us unique, and being able to build on those things. I think that is something that make us unique, and I think using those things will really benefit those women. I would also say to make sure that they are looking for people that can help them through whatever journey they're working on. So looking for mentors is so important, and knowing how to stay up to date, learning all the time, and not seeing themselves as different, but just seeing themselves as another human in technology.
Yeah, I mean, success is definitely not just a destination, right?
Yeah.
It's about
Yeah.
continuously growing your life. And I'm glad that you connected back to the mentorship point, because I think it's relevant and it's important in today's world.
It is.
People are looking for mentorship, but they don't know where to start. Maybe they are in a creative field and they go to the software engineer who's a mentor. Can you highlight where should these people get started? What should be the right way to connect to the right mentor?
I'm glad you asked that question, because it's one of the questions that I get the most about how do I get a mentor and how do I even reach out the very first time. And I always tell people finding a mentor is like finding a good friend. Sometimes you meet people and you click, and sometimes you don't.
Yes.
And I would say never ask a person to be your mentor if you've never had a conversation with them. And even if you've had a conversation with them, the way, and look, everybody has to find their way. So take it with a grain of salt. Some of what has worked for me and the people that I coach, what I tell them is ask somebody for 20 minutes. Don't ask for an hour. Even don't make it half an hour. Make it a short conversation.
Right.
And approaching somebody can be difficult for some people. So what I tell them is just send a quick note and say how much you admire something that they are good at.
Yes.
So, and have that conversation. I would say if somebody doesn't reply to you, also don't give up. I can tell you that sometimes
Yes.
emails get lost, and I've deleted emails by mistake, and I can never get back to people.
Absolutely.
So most people, I think, are willing to help and will give you time. And if they cannot be the right connection for you, they may be able to find somebody else that they know that may be a
Yes.
better mentor for you. Because I also think that we go through different stages and phases in our career, and we, again, like a friend, right? We have friends in different stages of our lives, and mentors are in the same way. Some people will come for a quarter or 6 months or a year or,
Yes.
Different seasons.
Setting the right expectations is
Setting the right
important.
expectations, and also know that a mentor isn't somebody who's really there to help you find your next role.
Yes.
Or to
I
help
agree.
you
That
find
is
the
very
next
important.
job. Yeah, it's somebody who can give you advice on how can you get better and how can you find your path, and maybe they will help you find connections.
Yes.
But it's more about what you can learn from them and what you can share with them than what they can do for you in the moment, in the short term. And so that's why I think it's so important to approach it in like, is this a friend? Can this person be a friend to me in this stage of my life?
And when you don't know what to write, We have Chat GPT.
Exactly.
So
Nowadays,
now
that should
things have
not
become
be
more easier.
yeah. And I would really encourage people to not be afraid to reach out, and
Not at
don't
all.
reach out to one person, reach out to 5, 10 people, see what what sticks. So try different people, and again, sometimes they're gonna show me work, sometimes they may not, but never give up.
Yeah, I'll say keep it short and sweet.
Short and sweet.
And you can write that in ChatGPT. That will be helpful. And wisdom is overflowing here. So I hope you all
Yeah.
are gathering this wisdom from Abby and learning from the best. And with that, move on to our last segment of the show. Abby, thank you so much. Everything that you've shared right now is absolutely invaluable. And love how you've shared your story and connected with so many people around the world. The story of being an immigrant is absolutely inspiring. And with that, we come to the end of our show, which is called The Burning Questions. And my first question to you is, tell us a secret nobody knows about you.
Yeah, and I've had a hard time thinking about secrets because frankly, I'm not good at keeping secrets myself. So I don't have anything that I would say nobody knows about me. But something that I thought I would share that I have not shared publicly before is that my husband and I have been married for 17 years. And we tried having children and we couldn't. And it's hard when people ask, how many kids do you have? Or they just assume that we have kids. And we tried and it just didn't work out. And I can empathize so much with women that are going through that because I don't know what's going on in the world, but I guess maybe since I went through that experience, I see a lot of women that are struggling with that.
Yes, they are.
And I have a big family and I have a lot of nieces and nephews and I'm grateful for that. But it's just something that I think when I retire or maybe in a few years, I would like to do something to be in community with those people that are struggling with that, or just so that they know
So
that
nice to hear.
life, I want people to know that as a couple, you can still be happy and you can
Yes,
have
you can be.
a fulfilling life without having kids. And I'm really happy with my husband. We love to travel.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to retiring as soon as possible.
Sure.
Which I tell him, like, hey, if we had kids, we wouldn't have to worry about putting them through
You
college
would.
and all those things. So I'm like, aren't we lucky in a way? But there's advantages and disadvantages, but that's
I know you're making a very courageous face, and I appreciate your honesty, and thank you for sharing that. So many moms around the world are going through, or so many women around the world go through this every single day of their life, and to just speak openly about it is requiring a lot of deep courage. So thank you for doing that. Abby, was there any time in your life where you thought of giving up on your career?
Yes, and unfortunately, it wasn't too long ago. And I guess we were getting very deep in this conversation. There was a situation not long ago where I found out that there are these dark websites where people go and they have they talk about their companies and different situations, and I was blind to the conversations that happen in this dark webs or websites, and somebody told me about these things that were being said about me. And as a leader, right, I have to make decisions that sometimes are up to me and sometimes are not up to me, right? It's corporate when you have to lay off people or you have to make those tough things that are part of your job. And what I found out is that people were talking about me and saying how, like, I played the Latina card, and the only reason I'm still where I am is because I'm like the Latina, and all of these things about how I got to where I am and why, and who I had to sleep with, and all these things that they would never say about a man that looked different, than me.
Sure.
And literally they were talking about how, like, oh, the DNI, people and how I do things like what we're doing now. And I do events to support the women in tech and, Latinas in tech in the Seattle area.
Right.
And so I was being judged for doing all those things because in they were saying was that I do all those things just so that I can, try to get to a different level and be where I am. And I'm like, if you think that it's all these misconceptions, and that really hurt me when I read all those things, because I worked so hard to be where I am, and I've had to overcome so much.
Sure.
And I'm in a position in my life where I'm like, I don't have to put up with all of these things. Like, no matter what I do, I'm going to be judged. And when you're a leader, right, you have to go on and you have to, I don't know if the people that are saying these things are in my team or my peers or who they are, but I know that they're judging me, right? And so it was very, very hurtful. And it really made me just rethink everything that I'm doing. And I think that what was really tough is that it made me rethink about how doing this podcast and doing these events to support others, if it's something that I should continue to do. And then I talked to somebody and they said, like, well, what happens if you don't keep doing these things, right? Like, you're letting them be happy, or you're giving them what they want, which is for you to give up because they don't want other people that look like you to get to where you are. And so at the end of the day, I just have to be true to myself and know who I really am and what I have done and what I haven't done. And so, but it was a very, very hard situation that I had to overcome.
I can't even believe that you had to deal with that just because a woman is at the top of her career or at a particular stage in her life. She has to go through this, and it's not acceptable. And I'm glad you did not give up on your career, and we are here today talking to you because you've just inspired so many more women to not stop just because somebody is backbiting or like bitching behind your back. So in the real world, that's not true.
I literally had to look it up, and I was like, oh, this is what it means when people just feel like they can say whatever they want about you and it's all anonymous.
Celebrities face trolling on their face on social media, but we as women or immigrant or at the women like you at the top of a career are going to face trolling behind your back because people cannot come up and say that face to face, right? So they need some kind of power within themselves to bully you behind and see if they can get more peers doing that and they feel good about themselves. It's about feeling good for themselves, not for you.
And this is why I just couldn't believe it, because frankly, I'm like, why are they even talking about me? I'm just a senior director. Like,
jealousy.
there's like C-levels and EVPs and SVPs, and I'm like,
jealousy.
I can't even.
I think that was very interesting that we actually spoke about this, and I got so much wisdom out of it. This was supposed to be burning questions, and I know it went into a little more deeper conversation. And I'm going to switch my question by asking you a more deeper question. You're an immigrant from a Latino background. Did you ever face racism in this country?
I have in several situations, but I think the one that really, where it was just very prominent, was when I read these comments about me, because it was all about like, oh, she plays the Latina card, and the only reason why she's in this role is because she's the only Latina director in this group, and everything was about me being a Latina and being brown, and it was very blatant. And it's pure racism. And so, yes, I have been treated differently. I have not been served the way that I wanted to. And I do feel like in several situations I faced racism, but it was never so blatant as to like actually reading people be like, oh, DNI needs to die. And, she's just a DNI champion. And she's, it's just like.
I think it's all about remembering to just face forward, face your reality, and do not forget who you are as a person, because no skin color, no language can actually change your identity and who you are.
And embracing it. And I also, I think it's ignorance for the most part when people judge you because of the way you look or because of the way you are. And I just wish that people would want to get educated themselves more about learning about other cultures and traveling and relating to people and actually having a conversation,
Yeah.
and getting to know where we come from and why we do the things we do, and knowing that we have more in common than we think we do.
True. Thank you again for coming to the show, Women in the Making. And thank you for igniting this passion project that we had by your wisdom, your courage, your resilience, and your determination. You're such an inspiration to so many women, not only in your corporate life, but today you inspired more and more women to step up for themselves and never give up.
Thank you for doing what you're doing. It was my pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully some of the things that I've shared will resonate with other women. And I think it's so important to have women like you that are doing all of these things to help the rest of us have that community and help each other.
Absolutely.
And just have that support. So I wish you all the best, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you for coming. She immigrated with hope in her heart, faced uncertainty head on, and emerged victorious on the corporate battlefield. Remember, your story can also be a shining testament to the power of believing in yourself. Join us again next week with another extraordinary story that will fuel your aspirations and help you in your journey to be a woman in the making.